Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in July and August. I have a stack of books here. I also have some notes with me, so if you hear like a paper rustling in the background, that's why. I'm just going to jump right into it. The first book that I want to talk about is Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown. The subtitle here is An Indian History of the American West. I picked this up because I really wanted to read a book all about Native American history, and the way that this book was written and researched, it just made me want to pick this one up. The more information that I read about this book, the more I wanted to read it. This book was just heart-wrenching to read. Every chapter is about a different tribe. It really does something to you psychologically when you're reading tribe after tribe after tribe, and how every single one of them went through the exact same situation or something similar, how they were treated, how they were, forced into exile to places they didn't want to go. It's kind of like the same story over and over, and it just, for me in particular, it was really hard to read about. However, I'm really glad that I did read it. And it's going to be really hard to top this because it was just so well done. There's so much respect for these tribes. Hearing things from their own words is just like a punch to the gut. There goes my paper. But it's definitely a must read. The next one that I want to talk about is Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward. This is a story about a 15-year-old girl named Esh and her family that live in a poor town in Mississippi as they prepare for Hurricane Katrina. This book is kind of about Esh and her trying to find her place in the world. She has recently found out that she's pregnant, and so that's kind of a storyline. But then there's another storyline with her brothers, and I have to say that it didn't really connect with me. I felt like there was different storylines, but no actual conflict or resolution. There's no wrapping up of loose ends or anything like that. It kind of just is laid out as kind of a snapshot. You're learning about this family, you're showing up for this event that's about to happen, and then the event happens, and then we just kind of like leave them. There's this oppressive tone and atmosphere that just takes over this whole book. It was not a fun book to read at all, but that's okay. I don't mind reading books like that. I just felt like this book didn't really have a purpose. Like I can't really tell you what the point of finding out about Esh was, what the point of being inside of her head was. I felt like I got to know her, but I didn't know what she would overcome, because really honestly her future to me, even at the end of the book, looks very bleak, and I don't know how things are going to turn out for her. So I kind of didn't like the fact that the ending was very open-ended, if that makes sense. I gave it 3 stars. I was very disappointed in it, to be honest, because Sing Unburied Sing was a 5-star read for me. But I just didn't connect to any of the characters. If you've read this book and you had a different experience, please let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to hear what you thought about it. But I personally did not enjoy this one that much. The next one I have here is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, and this was a buddy read that I did with Amanda, Acacia, Hillary, and Kristen. We read this over the course of a month, and this is a very highly anticipated book for me. I have heard so many good things about this book, and I felt like it hit a lot of those like buzzwords, multi-generational story, literary fiction, set in Korea and Japan, female author. I am about all of that, so I was really excited to read this book, and I thought that it would be a fun buddy read as well. This book started off really, really strong. It's about, well, it's a multi-generational story, but it starts with the family of a young girl named Sunja, and she has a mother and a father, and she is born and raised in South Korea. And then she marries a pastor named Isaac, and together they move to Japan for a better life. I love the character of Sunja. I love the character of Isaac. I love them together, and I loved the writing style. It was very simple writing, but I felt like it really fit with the culture and the story that we were getting. And then I really liked hearing about all of the kind of like the history and the conflict between Korea and Japan at that time. This book starts off in the early 1930s and goes all the way into 1989, so it covers a lot of history, but I didn't really know a lot about Japan before the war, and kind of like the cultural differences and the animosity between the countries. So that was really interesting to learn about. However, towards the middle to end of the book, as we get to learn about new generations, I just wasn't as invested. And actually, I felt like the tone of the book kind of changed. I don't know if that was on purpose, but there were some like scenes in here that were either sexual in nature or just crude in a way, and I just felt like they didn't really fit with the rest of the book. It kind of took me out of the story sometimes because I was like, what am I reading now? I mean, I was not expecting this from the beginning of the book to where I am now. It was kind of like that experience. However, I really loved that Sunja is part of the story till the very end, and I just really cared about her. So I felt like I struggled with her and kind of was on a journey with her as she raises a family in these tough times. So overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a very solid book. I can see why it's, you know, so praised. And I definitely am going to be checking out whatever Min-Jin Lee writes next. She also reminded me a lot of Celeste Ng, which is another writer that I love, who also happens to be Asian. So yeah, I'm just really glad that I finally got to this one. And even though I felt kind of like iffy towards the end, I still enjoyed it overall. The next one that I want to talk about is one that I ended up loving, and that's Perla by Carolina de Robertis. I picked this book because of the cover and of the fact that it was a Latin author, and also the subject matter. This book deals with the dirty wars in Argentina, a time in history that I knew absolutely nothing about. I thought I knew what this book was going to be about just based off of the inside cover and the synopsis that were given, but there's so much to this book. I mean, it's a short book, but it just has so much going on. First of all, it's kind of like a genre-bending book. It's obviously literary fiction and historical fiction because it's based on true events, but it also has kind of like a paranormal / magical realism woven throughout the story that really just added this extra layer of awesomeness. The main character, Perla, she is growing up in a household where her father was on the wrong side of history during the Dirty Wars, and so there's this kind of like unspoken secret or kind of like a tension in the household. Lots of things came to light after the war, and so her father and his role in the war is one that Perla really has to grapple with, and she knows that she cannot accept it, but at the same time this is her father, a man that she loves. So there's kind of like that inner conflict that she has. There's also the case of a stranger that shows up in her house and kind of makes her question everything that she's ever known, and kind of force her to come to terms with the fact that when it comes to her father and her family, she has to make a choice. So all of these things are being talked about in this book, but the way that the author has written this book, it's so lyrical, and I don't know, certain passages that just felt like it was so poetic, and I don't know, it's just the writing style for me. And I'm so happy that I stumbled upon this book and this author. I guarantee you I will try many more books by her just because I loved it so much. I was just so surprised because the synopsis really does not give you any indication of the type of story you're going to get. And so I ended up giving this 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it, obviously. I just don't know how to market this book in a way. I mean, it's great for anybody that's into historical fiction. It's great for anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about Latin American history. If you enjoy literary fiction, if you're okay with kind of like paranormal / magical realism, if that doesn't take you out of a story, then this is a great book to try. I just really enjoyed it. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about are 2 audiobooks. The first audiobook was The Last Juror by John Grisham. This was really random pick for me, but I wanted to have an audiobook on while I did my road trip from Tucson to Florida. It was 30 hours of driving, and so I knew that I wanted to have an audiobook, but not just any audiobook. It had to be an audiobook that I didn't feel like I had to, you know, pay attention to it all the time, because when you're driving and stuff, and I had so much on my mind that I didn't really want a book that would demand my focus, so I thought that something light would really work, and this was perfect. John Grisham usually writes like legal thrillers and books like that, but this book was not really like that. It was more like a mystery wrapped up in kind of like a, there is a case in this story, but it's not like the main part of the book. It's set in a small town, and there has been a murder at the beginning of the book, and when the victim is dying, she says the murderer's name, and so the murderer happens to be a young man from a very rich family that happens to be kind of the odd, like, black sheep of the small town. They live in like an isolated part of town. They're very rich because of questionable reasons, and so when this man is sent to trial for this murder, they try to hire the best lawyers and acquit him, but that doesn't work. He's actually sentenced, and as he's being carried away, he threatens all of the jurors. And the mystery part is that when he is paroled, a lot of these jurors start to get murdered, and so they immediately think that it's the murderer, but we don't know for sure, so that's kind of like where the mystery comes in. The rest of the book is kind of like an account from a newspaper editor who's our narrator, and he's just telling us about what happened in this small town, kind of like the years after the trial, and then how the town reacts to all of a sudden these jurors being picked off one by one. So I thought that it was really enjoyable. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did, and I honestly didn't think that I would care that much about the case or whatever, but since it was kind of like a mystery, I was kind of into it, and I wanted to find out who was the one that was, I obviously had my theories, but you never know with a mystery. And yeah, it's not like the best written book of all time or whatever, but I thought it was an excellent audiobook. The narrator had kind of like a southern accent, which I really enjoyed because the town, I think, is in Mississippi, so it was perfect. And then the next audiobook that I read was for the month of August. It was my book club pick, and that was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is a story of two sisters, Isabel and Vienne, that are living in Nazi-occupied France and kind of their role in the resistance. This is obviously set in World War II, and I thought that it was a very interesting look at the French resistance during this time. I was very nervous about this book because I have done a lot of research and just learned over the years about World War II, and a lot of authors take this kind of like World War II banner and then just run with it, and some are very liberal with history and the stories, what their characters do and all that stuff, but this book was very well researched, and the book is actually based on a real person. I also found another woman that played a role in kind of like the events that are being described in this book. I don't want to really talk about what Isabel or Vienne do, but as part of the resistance, because I think that would be kind of a huge spoiler, and part of the reason that I enjoyed this audiobook was kind of seeing them fall into their roles over time as the war progresses. I thought that this book was kind of like an emotional roller coaster. There is a romance, but honestly, I didn't think that it was that big of a part of the book. I thought that the fact that they're trying to survive and resist the Nazis, I thought that that was a bigger part of the book and the part of the book that I enjoyed the most. Also, I felt myself being drawn to Vienne, the older sister, a lot, and the choices that she made. If I were in that situation, I would have probably done the same thing. Even though the two sisters went very different paths, they were both very brave in what they did, and their role was very important no matter how small or how big it was. Definitely give this a try if you're interested in World War II and kind of a different aspect to World War II that I'm not really used to, which is the resistance movements. If you like historical fiction, if you like a little bit of romance, and you are looking for an excellent audiobook, because this audiobook is amazing. The narrator kind of takes on a French accent when she's doing a lot of the dialogue, and it's just, it really feels like you are being transported to a different place, and so I really enjoyed it. And I definitely am going to be reading more of Kristen Hanna because I thought she would be more of a, I guess I misjudged her based on some of her earlier books. And then the last book I want to talk about is What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Ray Carver. This is a collection of short stories. I was warned that this story short story collection was going to be bleak, and they were not wrong. I find it really hard to describe what the theme is here. I guess the theme in my mind would be depressing poor and middle America, how they come to terms with the lives that they're leading or come to terms with difficult situations that arise just by living day-to-day life. As individual stories, it's very hard to judge them individually, but as a whole, you can kind of see what he was trying to do. Very unique. I've never read anything like this. It kind of makes me want to try some of his other works, but at the same time, it's like I don't really want to be depressed when I pick up a book. And I was so kind of like, I don't know, it was just such a bleak and depressing type of tone for every one of these stories. And some of them left me kind of wondering, like, what the hell did I just read? But yeah, definitely memorable for sure. So that's what I read for July and August. Let me know down in the comments if you read anything interesting in the last 2 months, or if you have any comments or suggestions based on what I read and talked about in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.